1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is Rob Galbraith. Rob is one of the most fascinating and versatile music people I know. He discovered R&B legend Clifford Curry back in the 60s and has been Ronnie Milsap's producer for over 30 years. Rob's also a songwriter, publisher, and occasional artist who has released a handful of funky albums, including the underground classic Nashville Dirt. Thank you for being my guest today, Rob,
Okay.
and taking your time to talk to me about your life in music. You grew up in East Tennessee,
Yeah.
in Concord, Tennessee.
Yeah, Concord's a little town. It's better known for the Farragut community now. Farragut is about 15 miles this side of Knoxville. It was little bitty. It was all country when I grew up. Now it's like Brentwood or something, you know. But it was real rural, and I grew up there, and it kind of like in the shadow of the Smokies and the mother of country music. You know, that's the mother lode. That area, East Tennessee, man, is so that in Eastern Kentucky and Western North Carolina, Southern Virginia. That's where so many of the people that made Nashville what it is came from.
Yeah.
You know, Appalachian folks, hillbillies. But I never got into that, especially once I heard Ray Charles. It's like, I never got into country until I got down here and started working with Ronnie.
Yeah. What are some of your earliest memories of music around you, though? Were you born into a
Oh, back
musical
when I
family?
grew up, man, in the 50s, mid-50s, it was like, you know, Gogi Grant, The Wayward Wind, and, you know, songs back in the 50s. And then I heard Elvis on radio. I probably heard him on, you know, transistor radio coming from WLAC or somewhere at nighttime. And that was like, I'd never heard anything like that. Nobody had. You know, first time I heard Hound Dog, it's like, what's this? When you've been, all you hear is, you know, Frank Sinatra type crooners, and then you hear Hound Dog. My gosh, it was a big change. And then in '58, the first record I ever bought was a Hallelujah I Love Her So by Ray Charles. And then in '59, I heard What Did I Say with that Wurlitzer on it, and you know, that changed my taste. That's all I cared about. You know, that Ray was a big influence. But yeah, I grew up there and worked in bands. You know, learned piano in elementary school and played saxophone in a marching band. Then I got played saxophone in a rock band in high school. Then did it in college. Ended up leaving the saxophone behind and playing piano mainly. And then ended up doing some singing. And then I got off into radio. And I was in a band with Clifford Curry. That's how.
Is that how you met him?
Yeah, we were in a band together, 4 guys and Clifford. Sweet Clifford and the Midnights. First job we ever played together, I picked him up because he didn't have a driver's license. Clifford didn't have a driver's license until he was about 30 years old or older. And I picked him up, and we went to this club outside of Knoxville, and the audience consisted of 4 guys and a German Shepherd, you know, dog. And that was Clifford's and my start. And then we got a job at playing a real hip in-demand club up there on campus. Played it for a while. Then I thought I might want to get into radio, and a guy trained me, and I finally got a job part-time at IVK, which is a big country station now. And then I moved over to WNOX, and it was a big rock station. And when we were on the air at nighttime, WNOX was the first radio station in Tennessee, even before WSM. And it was the 12th in the nation. And they had a big signal. When they went at night, they went directional east. They covered all the way from Baltimore up down to Mobile. And I was on at nighttime, and I did that for a few years, and then I came down here. And then when I was up there doing that, I played with Clifford, and I'd go in and cut some demo tapes on him. A little mono track studio And then I talked to Buzz. I met Buzz somewhere there, and I talked to Buzz about it. Maybe I sent him a tape or something, and Buzz brought Clifford down here and he cut him. I remember I used to come down and I would try to parlay the fact that I was on the radio at night and we covered the whole daggone South, trying to find somebody in Nashville that was into something other than country. I knocked on a lot of doors. I would come down in the daytime, knock on doors, go back and do my radio show at night. And knocked on a lot of doors and finally met Buzz, and then probably over at Combine. I remember being at Combine Music, the old building, and where Bob Beckham ran it. And Bobby Russell, who didn't write for them, but he was there, and he knew I was on the radio and whatnot. And I was a 21-year-old kid, and he played me he had a little 5-inch reel-to-reel. We went in this little mono studio they had, and he played me that. He said, "See what you think of these two songs," and he played me a tape that had Honey and Little Green Apples, just him and a guitar. I said, "Golly Moses, yeah, who's not going to like either one of them?" And then Honey became a huge record. It spawned a cottage industry, as a matter of fact. But then I moved down here and was managing some R&B artist, Clifford, that Buzz had recorded, Clifford and a duo called Van and Titus Elmore.
Van and Titus. I met those two guys.
And then their names were Billy and George Brantley, and Buzz changed it to Van and Titus Elmore. He cut a good record on them, man. And then Willie did on everybody. And then he brought another act down here, Jonah Ellis, and he had Jonah and the Whale. And they were all three on Elf Records. And then I moved down here, was kind of coordinating their bookings, and did that for a while until I took my little booking agency over to another place. It was a big booking agency here in Nashville, and they had a publishing company. It was Hubert Long International. They had Moss Rose Publishing.
You ended up writing for them too, didn't you?
I did. I went over there and took my little publishing company, and I demoed a couple of songs that I'd written. I wasn't really one thought of myself as a writer. I demoed a couple, and Billy Sherrill heard one of them and put it out. And then he had me do an album, for him. And it was kind of like learning about production by the city, flying by the city of pants, on the job training, I guess. And I did that, and then I went to work for Columbia for a year. That record came out, and I was a reticent artist at best. I didn't care a whole lot about performing like that. I liked the studio stuff better. I didn't mind being in a band. That was fun, but I didn't. As a solo artist, I was a little nervous about that. So I told Billy, I said, "Man, this artist thing, I don't know if that's for me." I said, "I'm thinking about going to New York and trying out for one of those A&R trainee jobs I read about in Billboard." He said, "Well, forget that. Just go up there and interview for a regular A&R job down here doing rock." And so I did, and they hired me. And I was trying to find rock acts out of the South back in 1970. And as far as I know, it may have been the only time still that a major label has had somebody designated strictly to find rock. I found them a bunch of hit artists. They didn't sign any of them. J.J. Cale, I took up Crazy Mama after McElroy played on it. Crazy Mama, After Midnight, Call Me the Breeze, and Magnolia. After Midnight had been #1 by Eric Clapton. And the guy up there, he didn't hear it. So, and I talked to Leon Russell about that. It worked out better that Leon signed him later on Shelter Records. Johnny Cale, and then Harry Chapin, bunch of different artists. And I did that for a year. Then I went to Combine and started writing for them and did some recording then.
But you mentioned that first album was called Nashville Dirt.
Yeah.
It's one of those records. It has to develop this underground following.
Of all things, it kind of has. It's one of those records. I did another one later called "Throw Me a Bone" for RCA about 5 years later, and I'd go to parties or somebody's house for dinner, and they'd put that record on, and I'd be like, "Take that thing off, man!" I was how embarrassed, because it wasn't necessarily what was popular on the radio at the time. But it's the Dirt album, man, has kind of developed a bit of a following. It came out again the other day and on CD in either I forget, Japan or Korea, and Bone came out in the other one. But that was it's an oral picture. It's what you're doing at the time musically. It's not necessarily what you're going to be doing the same thing 5 or 10 years later, but musically that's what I did then. And it got some real good reviews. It didn't get it didn't sell much, but and I never went out on the road to promote it, but it got some great reviews. And it was fun to do. You learn about it,
Yeah.
Kind of got me started in that.
And a couple years later, you were also part of a band called Jubal with Dennis.
Yeah,
Lindley.
when I went over to Combine and started writing for them, I wrote some stuff, and then Bob Beckham put together a 5-piece band of Dennis Lindy and me and Alan Rush and Terry and Randy, 3 guys from Oklahoma that had been in a band out there. And Dennis didn't go out on the road with us. We went out and toured. We had real good management. Burt Block, he managed Christopherson people. But Dennis, he had gone out with Christopherson. He and Billy Swan, I think, were the Swanettes or something. They backed up Chris at the Troubadour somewhere, and Dennis came back and said, "I'm never going on the road again." And he didn't. But he worked in the studio with us. He was a great guy. And we, another guy named Lump, Ed Williams, played bass, and we went out and played. And Bobby Ogden, keyboard player, went out with us. We toured around for a summer or so there, and did that album. And then later on, I did that "Throw Me a Bone" album.
Yeah, didn't you, like as Jubal, also do some session work with Elvis?
You know what, man? I never met Elvis. Several of us, Dennis and Alan Rush and Bobby Ogden and myself, went and did a horn work on Promised Land, and I was the only horn player. I played saxophone. That thing was just clicking and clacking and going on, making all kinds of noise. And Bobby played like fuzz violin, I think, and Dennis played fuzz guitar, and Alan played fuzz bass. And between the 4 of us, when you put all that, it's kind of like that Nashville harmonic that was on some of Mickey Newberry records. You fuzz all that stuff together, and we at least had one horn in there, and you sink it back down in there, and it sounded like a saxophone section. I told Felton, I said, "Man, you took us off." And he said, "No, I promise you, it's over on the left. It's kind of down low." I said, "Felton, I can't hear it." But he said he claimed his own there. And then I got credit for another Elvis session at Graceland that Jerry Kerrigan borrowed a conga drum of mine and took it down to Graceland and cut some stuff. And I'd see my name on an Elvis record that I didn't have anything to do with. but Kerrigan signed my name on the time card, I guess. But yeah, I never met Elvis. I never saw him. At those shows he was doing, they're basically like flash bulbs and screams. That's all they were. But I mean, Dennis, I don't even know if Dennis ever met him. Dennis wrote one of his biggest records, though.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did that for a while, and then did the "Throw Me a Bone" album, and then Bruce Dees and I brought Larry John Wilson up here and produced some stuff for him for Combine.
Yeah, those records are some of my favorite records.
Well, they've got their own little following, man. They are well thought of. Those are good records. We cut half of one, the last one, Loose Change. We cut half of it here, and half in Muscle Shoals. I think that was the one. I don't think it was that second album. But first album we did everything out at Chip Young's studio out in Murfreesboro. And the second album, I don't know. I think we may have done it here, but Larry John was an interesting bird. His was a useless death because he had a head injury of some kind, and he was up in a hospital in Virginia. And my understanding is that he was kind of headstrong, and he was all hooked up to IVs and things. Needed to go to the restroom and didn't want to bother calling the nurse. So just got up and was walking to the restroom and fell and died. And he was going to overcome what he had, whatever it was that he was in there for initially.
Yeah, I only met him once at one of Donnie Fritz's Christmas shows at
Oh, yeah.
Douglas Corner. And Donnie's somebody else that you have a lifelong friendship with. How did you meet him initially?
Oh, at Combine. Chris wasn't around all that much, but Donnie was around there. We wrote one song together called, I think it's called "I'm on My Way," and we thought it'd be good for Brenda Lee. She really was, her career had already peaked, but they were pitching it to Brenda Lee, and whoever was doing it turned her down. And Donnie and I said, "Oh, she'll never strike again if she didn't cut that song." I don't remember that much about it, but Donnie he's one of a kind.
And you recorded 300 Pounds of Hungry that he wrote with Eddie Hinton on your second album.
I've cut that. I've done that thing live on most every show I do, man. I call it a lyrical giant. I tell people, I didn't write this, but I've done it a long time. I guess Tony Joe and Donnie and me may be the only ones ever do that song.
Well, Donnie and I just performed it in Birmingham Saturday night.
Did y'all do it?
And he always introduces it as, and this is a true love song. And then we kick into it.
He does. Yeah, Fritz. Oh, Donnie, my daughter did she's a writer, she's a novelist, journalist type writer. She teaches school here in town to support her habit of writing. Lacey, my daughter, but she wrote for the Scene for a while and different things. But she was doing a profile on Donnie, and they became good friends. And I used to find out what Lacey was up to more by talking to Donnie than I talked to Lacey. He'd come up to town, they'd get together, and they'd go to some shows or something. You know, she just loved Donnie, and he's a wonderful guy.
You sure?
And we're lucky. The last time I saw Christopherson, we were talking about, I said, man, we're lucky Donnie's with us, because he went through some tough physical stuff.
Yeah. One thing that was really cool about that show we did in Birmingham is the surgeon who put in his new kidney was there at the show, and the two of them had a really good moment.
Who was that?
The guy who did his kidney replacement surgery.
Oh, he's right. See, he's had some. I don't know what Donnie's had, kidney, heart, and everything, man. So he was there. Well, that's cool. Donnie's done well, man. He seems to be healthy. You know.
Yeah, he's
hanging in. You can't explain Donnie to people, man. He's a legendary guy, and he's one of a kind. That leaning man of Alabama. He ever played that song called, what's it? Ooh, something like that. I don't know if he and Penn wrote that, but a song called Ooh. Damn, Donnie.
I need to ask him about that.
Ask him about that.
Yeah.
That is funny. He's a sweet, as natural a guy as there is. And if you're around Donnie and want to be friends with him, man, you better not be any airs about you, because he's laid back. Donnie reads a lot too, man. You know, he's a fairly voracious reader, much more so than me. But novels and things like that, you know, smart guy, but he's one of the beautiful people.
He sure is. So earlier you mentioned some of your production work with Larry John Wilson, but you also produced Kenny Rogers, and your most enduring professional relationship with Ronnie Milsap.
Yeah, I met Ronnie back when I was on the radio, because he used to listen to me when he was in Atlanta. He was doing an R&B type thing, kind of like the white Ray Charles. Well, Ray told him, he said, man, they already got one of me. You need to be who you are. But Ronnie he could imitate anybody. And he cut a record for Scepter. And we were playing on the air, and he came up and did a promo thing, and I met him. And I used to go down and visit him in Atlanta. And then when he would move to Memphis, I'd go visit him down there, and then I'd tell him about Nashville, one thing or another, what I knew of it. And he came up here and played a club for a while, and then I took Tom Collins one time down there, and Tom and Ronnie played him I Hate You. I had Ronnie play a couple of things, and Ronnie played him I Hate You, which Dan Penn wrote.
Penn song.
And Tom could see that there was a countryside to Ronnie. So when Ronnie was up here, they took him to Stone Country, and Jerry Bradley thought, well, you know, he's rock. But they played him. I think they cut him over here, or maybe they cut it Clements, but I think they cut a bunch here because their office was right across the street. And Tom and Jack Johnson, and they cut some stuff on Ronnie, and got him a deal, and he was real country. And then in '78, Ronnie wanted to start a publishing company. Basically, besides being involved in publishing, I think he wanted it because it was as an input for people to bring him songs. Because he was getting all his songs through Tom. Tom's a wonderful publisher. But some people felt that, you know, that Tom may not give their song as much credence if he didn't publish it. And so in addition to Tom finding songs for him, Ronnie started that company, and we were a place that people could. That's why Tommy Brassfield brought up No Getting Over Me.
Yeah.
You know, and played it for me. I told Ronnie when it was on Thursday, I said, man, you need to hear this song. He said, well, give it to me and I'll take it home. And we had another Mac McAnally song that I had given to Ronnie called "An Old Flame Burning in Your Eyes." I think it was an old flame burning. And Ronnie took it home and didn't cut it. for whatever reason, I don't know. Alabama did it. But I told him, I said, no, you'll come in here and listen to it in my office right now, or you'll hear it on the radio by somebody else. This was not going to last. And that weekend, we put it on hold that afternoon. And that weekend, Tommy and them turned down Alabama, Janie Warnes, and Jennifer Warnes and Janie Fricky. And 3 weeks later, we cut it. And 1 week after that, they came out with a Blitz, one of those colored 45 vinyl records. And I think Rick handed it to Walt in his receiving line when he's getting married. Like 1 month after they demoed the daggone thing, it's in his hand. I think Walt thought, well, this is pretty good. This music business is okay. A huge record. But Tom and I produced some stuff together with Ronnie, and then I've been doing him by myself for the longest time. And we did one record, a duet with Kenny. It got a Grammy. We did one thing with him. But the thing I think, one of the things I'm most proud of working with Ronnie was, besides the Mike Reed songs that we developed, was at that time we were maybe the first, and I think there's been one since, but this was back in like 85, I guess, 86. We got nominated for an engineering Grammy. Now, I didn't engineer, but they would take 50 of the top albums, or a bunch of albums, and send them to these top engineers in the country, and they would pare them down to 5. We were in there with Pink Floyd and Michael Jackson. There's a classical division and a non-classical. And to just be nominated for an engineering Grammy, that was pretty cool, man, because we made some pretty good sounding records. Spent a lot of time in there. Ronnie's pretty much a perfectionist. And he's like Ray Charles, man. When you're in there in the studio with Milsap, he's like one big ear. He's not given to the distraction of vision. Like right now, I'm talking to you, but I can see everything in this studio, and everything registers with your mind. But when you don't see, man, you only hear, and he hears deep, and he hears through things, and you have to work to stay up with him. But it was educational working with Ronnie, man, all those years. But I've worked with him since '78. We're kind of like joined at the hip, done a lot of work together, and I found Mike Reed as a writer, and he was kind of leaving his one company he had been writing with for briefly and going to go back to Cincinnati. He was an ex-pro football player. And I'd done some work with him, and I love what he did. And he came by the office before you were going to leave town, like, in a month or something, asked me if I'd be interested in him writing for us. I said, Lord, yeah. So we had a handshake deal. Not an exclusive writer, just shake hands. You write them, we'll cut them, and it worked like that for 7 years. We did that. And he wrote like 11 number ones for Ronnie, and had like 15 cuts or something. And then later on, he wrote that wonderful "I Can't Make You Love Me" for Bonnie Raitt. He's still writing wonderful stuff. I'm doing this new album. Do you know about that one, Andreas? It's a duet album. Basically, the idea is do your favorite Milsap song with Ronnie.
Okay.
And
is that the one that you had Leon Russell on?
Leon's on there. Ryan Leon did one, and Willie's on there with a new Mike Reed song. We've got like 4 iconic artists with Leon and Willie and Dolly Parton and George Strait, and then we got Little Big Town, Jason Aldean, Luke Bryan, Casey Musgraves, and Stephen Curtis Chapman from the Christian community did a thing with us. It's a wonderful album. We got 3 or 4 new songs, and the rest of them are Milsap hits. It's really, I have to say, it's pretty good. People asked us, we didn't even cut Smoky Mountain Rain. People said, what who's going to do Smoky Mountain Rain? I said, well, we didn't cut it. We just didn't think of it as a natural type thing to do a duet with, and it didn't have any particular person in mind. But we needed to cut that. So I said, well, it'll make sense if we could get Dolly to do it, because she's known part of that area. Yeah. And so I checked what she likes to sing in, and we cut it a step lower than what Ronnie originally did it, and which was a little too high for most singers, but it's just perfect for Dolly. She said, well, if it's in the key I can do it in, I'd be honored to do it. And it worked out great, man. She's a very creative person, and we turned that song around. Instead of Dolly singing it from a third person, like they're both singing about Ronnie's relationship with her, this other woman, she sang it like that. And then we asked her, said, we thought about what possibility of doing it like she was the woman who he left, first person. So instead of her singing from a phone booth in the rain, he called to tell her, she said, from a phone booth in the rain, he called to tell me. And I said, and then she changed it. I said, don't bother, I'll be gone. And she put a whole nother spin on the thing, man, and different ad-libs on the end, made the whole new record. It's pretty cool. But anyway, I've been working on that for a while. And then we got this Clifford Curry thing with Ronnie happening, that duet, a beach music record. And that's kind of what's happening in my world today.
Yeah. And we talked about the couple solo records you did in the 70s, but then after not doing another one for a long time, you did Too Long at the Fair not too long ago, which is another really cool record.
Fred Mullen, my friend here, producer, he wanted me to go back in and do some stuff. And I think the last time I sang live was like in 80, something like that. And I started back singing again live around here in 2007, I guess. And 2008. It was like a long time. I was off. But I did that Too Long at the Fair thing. It was kind of more of a jazzy, bluesy type stuff. And had those players come in on a Saturday. I think it was 2 Saturdays. And they did it for either, I don't know, for free or for a pittance, whatever. They just did me a favor. And I was nervous because they knew me as a producer, and publisher. They didn't know I'd ever done any artist stuff. Well, a couple of them did, but most of them didn't. And all of a sudden, in there singing with Hungate and Chester Thompson and Pearson and Catherine and Paxton, it's like, whoa. I always said a producer ought to be forced to have to go in the studio and sing with other musicians, sing live sometimes, just to remind himself of what it's like for an artist. Because we go in the studio and produce, and you've done a lot of it. You don't get nervous going in. You may get excited. If you do your work, you pretty much got to know what you're going to do, people you're going to work with, and the songs you're going to have the artist do. But it's I forget how artists sometimes can be nervous, especially new ones. And because I got, man, this was 04, 03, I guess, when we cut that thing, and that was 30 years after I'd done some of my work. And but I've been producing so long, and so it was. I got a little nervous with these guys, but it turned out fun. I enjoyed it. And that thing came out actually was released over in Japan, and I'm doing another record. Really, I'm not doing it, but there's another label over in Japan that's going to be re-releasing a bunch of my old demos, old Combine demos from the 70s, and Fred's going to be kind of overseeing it, and there's a good chance Fred and I may go over there and play Japan, Korea, somewhere. He plays drums. We'll hire a bass player. It'd be fun with me and Fred. Anyway, that I hadn't done anything like that in a long time, but it was once again, it's a good experience, and it's also to see some of these players doing stuff that they don't normally do that much of around town. We had some serious musicians on there. And Hungate, of all things, man, he didn't play bass. He played guitar along with Pearson. He had kind of a fat guitar and did just rhythm stuff. He's a really good guitarist. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've done that. For whatever that's worth.
But more recently, you also started performing live occasionally with some of those guys, Chester Thompson and Bruce D, Sam Levine. And you guys have the greatest name of a band I've ever heard.
What's to have a step among friends?
Yeah. Well, I guess half of the people probably don't get it, but the ones who do,
I've had to explain it. We don't really rehearse much, and because if you play a C and a D, but they're a full step apart, that can be kind of hip, kind of work every now. And a C and an E flat is a minor third, and that's harmony. And a C and an E is, but a C and a C sharp, man, as a rule, there's going to be a wave developed there. Especially, and so not rehearsing really, we have a tendency to have a few mistakes. What is it? Was it Mitch Humphreys or something said the longest, the furthest distance in the world is distance between two half steps. It's something to that effect. Cause but we try not to get so tight that we let the correct chords get in the way of the groove. You know, we don't want to be too tight. I don't think there's much chance of that. Larry London, the drummer here in town that I dearly love, man, used to use him on some R&B type things, and he always wanted to go in and just play, just jam or something. I never was that good. I never would do it. I'd go play live, and I never did until after he died back in the early 90s. It was something like that. He Hungate back in 06 or 07 was telling me one night, said, man, you ought to get back and playing live some. And I remember that London was urging me to do that years before, and I didn't have, so I took Hungate up on it. I said, well, if you'll play it, he said, yeah. And so I got David and Chester and that group basically, and with Bruce Dees, and then David and Chester and Jack Pearson, and had Max Abrams playing saxophone and Bruce, and so we started doing that live. And then David played one job with us, and then he went on the road with Vince Gill. So then we had to have a different bass player. We had Bob Babbitt for a good while, a legendary Motown bass player, until he had that brain tumor and died of brain cancer. And then we've had different guys, but Babbitt he was wonderful. But we play once every 4 or 5 months down at Douglas Corner, whether there's a public outcry for it or not. We force it upon the town.
Yeah, you're playing guitar and keys.
I play keys mainly, and some guitar on just mainly ninth chords. Occasionally raised nine, the hold it chord. But yeah, I don't do any lead work either on the piano or the guitar. Either one. I got too many good lead players around, to do that. But it's fun. I basically function as the female chick singer, and I know that's redundant, but she's a female chick singer, because I basically just get the song started. Especially in the early days, I would just get the song started and then spend a good bit of the time trying to figure out how to stop those bastards. They get into it. It's like we never really had endings. We get started, but it was and I've got several people. The last time we played, Mike Reed came down and sat in with us.
Yeah, I was there.
Were you there at that job?
I was there.
Yeah, and then Jesse and Mike. Jesse sings with, and Chester's wife sings some. Chester, that particular show, he had just had back surgery, and so that young woman drummer that plays with Jesse, she's really good, man, too. She's like Chester's protege, Kaylee Moyer. She played with us. That's a fun night, that thing. And now Kyle Denny's going to start playing organ with us. This thing has turned into a damn R&B review. It's like each one of us does about 4 songs. It's fun though, man. There's some groove that goes down on that thing every now and then, and that's one thing I like about doing that is when I'm up there and we're playing some kind of, whether it's 300 pounds or some kind of some stupid groove thing, man. But the groove sometimes will be so good, it's like, yeah, I could do this all night long. Just listen to that with Chester and those guys, how good they are, and It's worth doing it just to be around those musicians and listen to them play on a live. Plus, I'm also a big believer of if you don't do hands-on, if you can. If you can't, then that's understandable. Then you get what you can from music and you enjoy it and you love it, and a lot of people are just thrilled by that. But for people who can actually who actually can play, I for many years have produced and published and worked with songwriters and such, but didn't put any hands on the instruments as far as playing. Except I played over in church some behind a savant type keyboardist. I was kind of like playing behind her, learning behind her, Carol Tronquist, and I did that. But I found that if you have the opportunity to play, I feel you don't get the full benefit of music, of the musicality, until you do hands on. By doing that, man, I found it to be much more fulfilling, no matter how bad. Just do it. Whether it's playing piano, guitar, or whatever, or singing, just it's because it's there for you. People who are musicians, it's there for them to actually do that. Either do it in their house, do it in a small club, do it however they do it. But it's because you play. Yeah. So that's a I didn't for a long time, for like 20-something years, speak of. I'm busy making a living, publishing, producing.
Yeah, and you had all those, long time collaborations like Mike Reed and Milsap, but you mentioned Jesse and Kaylee and Sam Hunter and some of the younger my generation that you've also kind of helped develop. How important is that to you to kind of pass it on?
That it helps. It doesn't keep you young. I get older, I try to stay active, playing tennis and trying to stay in decent shape and all. But as far as work-wise and emotionally, working with those young kids keeps you excited and keeps you active. Jesse's one of my closest friends, and Sam is too. I don't see Sam that much anymore. He's kind of gone in a different direction. But we work with those young kids, man, is really very important to me because it's the future, and both those kids are going to be around for a while. I know Jessie. We're getting ready to start cutting some stuff. We're going to start playing a record label. She's been writing with other people. Stuff she writes by herself is, I think, the best stuff she writes. But she's written with some co-writers that's written some good stuff, and she's Ronnie's favorite singer on the planet, man. Because she didn't know who Ronnie Milsap was. She's just 22, but I used her to help us work up the arrangements on these songs for these duets, and she and Ronnie just fell in love with each other, and they sound great together. And she's the only unknown on this album, and she. Like when Little Big Town, when they learned this version of Lost in the 50s, Jessie had done the female parts, and they would say, "Oh my God, you're great. Who are you with?" Figuring she was already tied up with management and labels. No, she hadn't even started that yet. Same thing with Casey Musgraves. When she met Jessie had done the guide vocal. Casey said, "God, you're great. I can't do what you do," but then Jessie got to see what Casey does. Casey turned that thing, man. On that, don't you ever get tired of hurting me? She did a country vocal on that thing, man, that anybody on the Grand Ole Opry would be proud of. And she was wonderful. And then she did No Getting Over Me also. And Jessie got to watch stylists like Casey in there and see what she did to that song. It wasn't about singing real high or licks or anything like that. And Jessie doesn't do that either. But it was just the interpretation, And Jessie also got to see these younger artists around Ronnie and the respect and honor they gave him, almost nervousness. We had already done Ronnie's vocals, but then he would go in the studio with him and be in there on a piano, and they would be on one mic, and we had Little Big Town all around one mic, and they sang, and Kimberly, she was really nervous singing that one solo verse, and then and with Luke. And then I'd send Ronnie home. After he sung some, they'd shot videos and things on it and kind of got an idea where it went. I'd send him on home. He'd leave. And then I would work on them, the individual artists, just solo. And Luke said, "I'll do a lot better now that he's gone." He said he's hard to sing in front of. But Luke did a great job with Ronnie and without him. Luke's a lot better singer than people give him credit for. It's what he did on this one, Stranger in My House, is pretty damn wonderful. He doesn't sing that type of stuff on the stuff he does. He's not, I told him, I said, "Man, you've done real well doing what you're doing, but there's a side of you that people don't know about on some soft stuff and also on some more rock type things." And but Jessie got to watch that, and it was a learning experience for her because she's since found out who Ronnie is and they're a close friend, but they sound great together and they're good for each other, But she's going to be around a while. Ronnie's he just loves her as a singer and a person. He has no idea how good a writer she is. He's never heard one thing she's written. It's going to be like a sucker punch when he hears what she writes. I think she's going to do well. It's all timing, timing, talent, perseverance, and unfortunately, talent may be the least important of the three sometimes. Hopefully, when timing is right, they've persevered and hung in there and gotten enough positive feedback to where they should hang in there. Hopefully, when things come together for them, that they've got some modicum of talent to make it work. But I've always said, talent and success are not commensurate. Just because you're talented doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Or just because you're successful doesn't mean you're necessarily that much a better singer or artist than the other people. It's a combination of factors.
Yeah. So that duets record is, as far as the recording goes, is that done or are you still adding to it?
The one we're working on now,
Yeah.
we got one other person to put on one song that we haven't found. It's a new song, and it's based around the history of NASCAR. It's kind of, the first verses are kind of like modern sounds with synthesized drums, and then it goes into a country type thing. It's called Southern Boys and Detroit Wheels. We got one singer to get on that, and then it's done. We've mixed everything. Kyle mixed it. It's finished except for that. It'll be out this year sometime. Hopefully within about 4 or 5 months to have it together and put that out. And we're talking. It's on an independent label, but right now they've got offers from 2 majors and maybe a third. You know, we've only played it for 3, and 2 of them want it, so they got to figure out. It'll end up being on a major label. But it's a really good album. It's a benchmark album for Ronnie, man. He sounds great on it, as he always does. And these other artists, they came up to him. I mean, those singers in Little Big Town, man, they're good. Each one of them in their own way, man. That Karen's become one of my favorite female singers. And the guys, man, they do Mike McDonald stuff to Sam Cooke type things. It's pretty amazing what they did. Anyway, that's that and Jesse have been what I've been working on mainly lately.
Yeah.
You know.
So, do you consider yourself a producer first, or is it just like the sum of all the different?
Well, I don't really publish that much anymore. I publish Jesse, but I don't really have an active publishing company, so I took her down to Ree Geyer, and Ree saw her and loved her, and so we split published Jesse stuff. So Ree does all the logistical stuff and the administration, and I help out with the creative end of it, and I'm still involved in publishing from that standpoint. But I don't know. I think I'm pretty good on recognizing good songwriters, and I've been around some really good singers, but I think I can. I like to think I'm pretty good with finding some songs and recognizing talent from a songwriter standpoint. But I guess I view myself as much a producer as I do a publisher. You know, I've done a lot of both. But and then I got this artist thing over on the side that I do that's kind of fun, just for the sheer part of the music. Lately I've had a couple of songs that have been in movies, which is kind of strange. I didn't even know the people that were pitching them had the songs. And it's kind of nice all of a sudden to find out that something's in a movie and some old demo.
Yeah.
You know, so I got that going for me, which is nice.
Yeah.
What's that from, man? What's that movie? Bruce and Mike are always watching Caddyshack from Bill Murray. Yeah. So I got that going for me, which is nice.
And that a demo collection of, I guess, some of your combined demos got released too, as Damn It All, about a year ago.
Yeah, it came out on Numero out of Chicago, and they're the ones that have got these things in some movies. They wanted to do some old things. You know, some of the songs were later on cut as masters. Probably most of them weren't. They were just demos, and they put that out. And they got one of them came out also in a double album yacht rock type set. That was a pretty cool thing. And those kids up there, man, kids, you know, they're your age, young guys. They got more faith in me as an artist than I have in myself. You know, they're fans of some of the stuff that I'm just shocked at that they like. You know, I'm not shocked, but I'm pleased. But it's surprising because I never put much stock in it. You know, I never really pursued that whole artist thing very much. I like being producing and helping artists and writers and such. I'm not really consider myself a singer. I can't sing footballs. You know, I hate my vibrato, what vibrato I've got, and so I'll sing and flit around. Or come off the note. I don't really not a singer type. It's more like a stylist. You do it. I only got one way I can do it, and that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah. Well, the way I first learned about you growing up in Switzerland is the one track that you had on that Country Got Soul compilation.
Yeah, they put a corner spit and whittle on one of those. and that was on that Nashville Dirt album.
Yeah.
And it's just all laid back, and just something that felt good. Didn't really know what we're doing. Sometimes, and sometimes, and it's had some influence on some people. Some of that. I had a young woman the other day from the West Coast who I'd met a couple years ago. It's an artist out there in her late 20s, and she had that Numero album, and called me. She's all inspired by it, and I was shocked. And I told her I'm very happy. I know she's a really good artist, and I didn't think that. But she'd bought it, and I said, well, that's good. Sometimes those things will mean something to people that you don't really know. I did one thing you probably don't know. When I left Columbia in '71, I'd met this people come through there from Ohio, and they were hippies to the nth degree. They had a damn cult, basically, turned out. And that they were doing music, and they were singing Christian songs that they'd written. And I went up and produced like 2.5 albums on them up at the Cleveland Recording Center. I would go up, and the first time I stayed in a hotel up there, the second time I stayed at their farm outside of town. And it was strange, man. The women wore, they were real biblical, literal. The women wore long dresses, wouldn't look you in the eye, had a downcast appearance, long hair. There was only one guy, the leader. They would look him in the eye, Larry. And he was a renegade type guy. It turned out that we did these albums, and they were all runaways from home. They were smart kids. Some of them had been into drugs, one thing or another, but they kind of like rescued them out there. And so we went in the studio, and they were singing these rock type songs, and they didn't have a drummer, but I hired a drummer up there for them. And a guy named Glenn Schwartz played with them, and he was in a group called the James Gang. And some other group up there, and he was a kind of a well-known guitarist. And I did these 2.5 albums on him. I left during the middle of the third album. I couldn't handle the leader anymore. He just was too hard to deal with. And turns out then they were like forced to disband because it turns out was abusing some of the children and the men, and the wives, and he was working those people to death. But I guess the point I'm going to make is there are two things. One is, he was a pain, but he had these people, and we cut some music that helped start the whole Jesus rock movement, which I didn't know that at the time. We just did what they had written. They weren't good musicians except for Glenn, and but we made it work, and it was called the All Saved Freak Band. There was a book written about them, and somebody may have even bought the rights to a movie, and Larry then disbanded, and he had to go out of Ohio or to Pennsylvania somewhere, and the rest of them, they even get together once every so often as survivors of that group. When I was up there, I only saw the good side of them, basically, although I couldn't handle him. But there was some stuff going on that I was not privy to, But then later on, I was talking to Phil Kagi, a guy, who Phil Kagi is?
That artist.
And I first heard his name through them because he's from that area. And he said, oh, yeah. I said, they're one of the pioneers of Jesus rock. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah, that group and Larry Norman and some other band were the first ones in the country that were doing rock music to Jesus lyrics. And same thing with Dan Arbach from Black Keys. When I met him, I said, I knew he's from that area, and he said he had all their albums. Dan knew of them because of Glenn Schwartz, and he brought Glenn in town. They cut some stuff. He told me last year or so ago. But they had, even though that guy was not a Christian man, the others were, and the stuff that they did influenced people and was a solace to people, and people liked and were moved by it, even though his intentions, and part of him, the intentions weren't good. And so it's like some of these screaming preachers on the air up in East Tennessee, or some of these TV preachers, they may not be pure of heart. Nobody is, but they may not be necessarily. They may be businessmen more than they are preachers. But there are people out there that hear them and see them that get something good out of it. And it was what with this thing, man. Some good came out of these albums, and more so than the guy Larry would have ever dreamed of, And I'm still in touch with some of them, but I did that back in the early '70s.
Yeah. So you mentioned early that some of Ray Charles's early singles, like "Little Spark," did you ever get a chance to work with him or meet him?
Not in the studio. I worked with him back in '83. Ronnie did a hour and a half TV special called "In Celebration," and he had a bunch of people: Gladys Knight, Glenn Campbell, Leon Russell, and so Ronnie and Ray go way back. And Ronnie didn't want Ray to have to tell him no, make it an awkward thing. So he asked me if I'd call Ray Charles. Well, yeah, I'd love to call him. So I called him and told him what Ronnie was doing. I said, wonder if you'd, I said, all they're going to pay is just scale, but would you consider coming in and doing this thing with him? And he said, yeah. He calls him Ronald. I said, well, all it pays is scale. He said, I don't worry about that. I said, all I want is 5 minutes alone with Ronald. I said, well, we can work that out. And so they came in and did it. And the 2 days of filming down at T-Pack, and the first day filming, Ray was on the first day, and he wore the band out, a couple of members of the band, getting them all squared away. And on Bruce Lee's guitar player, he was hard on Bruce. But then after it was over with, he told Bruce, he apologized. Man, I'm sorry being hard on him. But he got what he wanted. Bruce gave him what he needed. And so we got through filming, and I was out in the truck. I came in the dressing room that Ronnie had down at T-Pack. It was about half the size of the studio. It was a good size dressing room. People milling around, and in comes Ray with his manager. I forget his name right now. And we're standing around, and all of a sudden we hear this big poof. We heard this Ray hit a big thud. But what happened, they had gotten a hold of each other, and Ronnie takes his left hand and grabs a sighted person's right arm and follows him, pushes him. You know, let's go. And he has his right arm free so he can shake hands with him. And Ray is used to somebody, a sighted guy, grabbing his right arm and kind of leading him. So Ronnie grabbed hold of Ray's right arm, and both of them thought a sighted guy had a hold of him, and off they went. And they made it out the door. They had enough sense to know where what was to get out the door. And Ray ran Ronnie right into the damn wall on T-Pack. And lucky, his foot or something must have hit first because his face didn't. But it was the blind pushing the blind in that case. And then what Ray wanted to do, he wanted to go in the studio like the next day or so and cut 2 songs. And Ronnie was in the middle of this filming. Milsap only juggles one ball at a time, but he juggles it really well. And so Ronnie couldn't go in and do this with Ray in the time frame that Ray wanted to get it done. So Ray went in with Willie and cut 7 Spanish Angels, which is a big record, and he went in with Hank Jr. and cut 2 old cats like us.
Yeah. Bob Ray, the bass player, just told me about that. He was on that session.
Was he?
Yeah.
Bob's a wonderful guy, wonderful bass player. Yeah, but Ray wanted to cut those 2, but Ronnie couldn't. Time wasn't going to work for him, so Ray cut those other 2 guys. But that's the only time I was around Ray, man. He was rough on some people, some musicians and such, but I gave him a pass because and he may have been doing something back then. I'm not sure if he was off drugs or on them. I don't know. But and you know, he could just sing anything. And he and Ronnie there's several videos of things they've done together. It's pretty moving. Because when Milsap was at the blind school, he went down to Atlanta to see Ray do a show and met his pilot, and his pilot took him backstage and let him meet Ray. Ronnie was in high school. And people at the blind school said, you don't want to be a musician. You know, you'll end up being a ward of the state. You know, you're going to end up making seat bottoms or something, or cane bottoms or chairs. Ronnie went down and met Ray, and he told him, said, I thought about being a professional musician. Ray said, well, play me something. So Ronnie sat down and played him something. He said, son, it sounds like you got a lot of music in you. If that's where your heart is, I think you should be a professional musician. So Ronnie went back and told him at the blind school, Mr. Ray Charles said I could be a professional musician. That pretty much put an end to that, you know. And then they stayed in touch over the years. And one of the last concerts Ray did, they played at the time, the new stadium in Houston where the Texans play. It was the Reliance Stadium then. It was like 78,000 people or something, and they played. It was the culminating concert for the Houston Livestock Convention, which is a 3-week-long affair, and they did it with symphony, and they played. And after it was over with, Ray came to him and said, "Man," said Ronald, said, "I just love this." Said, "Let's get all our people together and let's go do a tour of this, a national tour." What a great idea! And we were going to call it the Colorblind Tour, and because different colors and both blind, you know. But then Ray fell and broke his hip or something and got cancer, and Ryan never saw him again. He talked to him, but he never saw him. He told Joyce after that show, he said, "Ray's not well," and he was weaker. And during that last year or so, he cut that Genius Loves Company.
Yeah.
And but that would have been a great tour, man. I would have gone out on the road for that one. I'd love to have seen that. Ronnie and Ray with a symphony playing 20 dates. Man, I wish that had happened. But that's the only time I was around Ray.
Okay.
You know.
So we're getting to the end of this, and do you feel like we kind of got to the essence of Rob somewhat?
Whatever that is. I think you did. You covered me playing live and producing and publishing and what I'm doing now, and you know, it's you just kind of fall into these things. I didn't know I was ever going to be down here doing this. I did radio and thought I might be doing that for a while, but you know, when I went to school, I didn't take any courses in journalism. They didn't have any communications things like for radio and TV like they do nowadays. I just learned by doing it. You know, there was no production, no music no music business courses. You just end up doing it. I know a lot of these kids that want to be in the music business, they can go to the schools and they learn some basics, but it just basically you have to do it, and it takes a lot of time. You know, especially these young engineers. You know, but yeah, I think you covered pretty much everything, more than people want to hear. Andreas.
Well, we'll leave it up to
That's
them.
when you know you've got enough. Like, people are tuning out right now; they're bored. But thank you for letting me come over here and hang with you, man.
Well, thank you for sharing all your stories and being my guest today. And I just wish you all the very best for all your
Same
future
thing with you,
endeavors.
Andreas. You're around some good people down there with young Donnie Fritz, and here with Buzz. You know, Buzz and Matt Gaden brought me to Nashville, and they're responsible for me being down here. So, Buzz, you can take some part of that blame, Buzz. You know. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you. This was the 22nd episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. We taped it at Buzz Cason's Creative Workshop recording studio in Nashville. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Until next week.